My fiancée looked me straight in the eye and said, "I need some space. Please don't contact me." I respected her decision. Then she posted photos of herself vacationing with her ex. So I gave her exactly what she asked for. I canceled the wedding, changed the locks, and sold the car that was in my name. 10 days later, she came back in full panic mode. Before we jump into today's story, I want to ask for a quick favor. We've noticed the channel has been losing a little momentum lately, and one of the best ways you can help is by subscribing. It only takes a second, it's completely free, and it really helps us keep bringing you more stories like this. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you so much. Now let's get into it. Alright, Reddit. Until recently I was engaged. Then, out of nowhere, my fiancée texted me saying, "I need some space. Please don't disturb me for a while." I respected her wishes without arguing. A few days later, one of her friends sent me screenshots. There she was, smiling on a tropical vacation with her ex-boyfriend. I didn't call her. I didn't send an angry text. I didn't even confront her. Instead, I got to work. By the time she came home, her key no longer opened my apartment. The car she'd been driving was gone, and so was her place in my life. Here's how it all happened. I'm 29 years old, and I own a custom motorcycle shop in Phoenix, Arizona. I make a decent living, not millionaire money, but enough to live comfortably. I've been working toward this since I was 20 years old. Last year was the first time I could honestly say my business was fully established, but it took years of working over 60 hours a week to get there. I started with nothing more than a tiny garage I rented from an elderly mechanic who was retiring. Today, I have 4 full-time employees and a reputation for building some of the cleanest custom motorcycles in the Southwest. None of it was handed to me. I saved every dollar I earned while working at other shops, attended business classes at night, and spent 3 years living in a studio apartment barely bigger than a shoebox so I could save enough money to start my own business. Every morning when I unlock the shop, I feel proud because every tool, every machine, and every square foot of that place exists because I earned it through hard work. I've never been someone who spends money carelessly. Part of that comes from watching what happened to my uncle years ago. During a brutal divorce in the 90s, he lost his house, his retirement savings, and eventually had to sell his small business just to pay the settlement. After seeing that, my dad gave me one piece of advice that stayed with me forever. "Luke, build your own safety net, because no one else will." Looking back, that advice probably saved me. I still remember buying my first professional tool set. My dad came over to my apartment, watched me organize my brand new snap-on wrenches, and simply nodded. "Good investment," he said. "Tools make money. Toys don't." Then he spent the rest of the afternoon helping me build a custom storage rack out of leftover wood from his garage. That's who my dad is. He doesn't just give advice. He helps you put it into practice. 3 years ago, when the housing market dipped a little, I bought my apartment. Since then, almost every extra dollar I've made has gone back into my investment accounts or into growing my business. I have very few luxuries. One is my midnight black Ducati Monster with a custom exhaust that sounds absolutely incredible. The other is my dog. Max is a 3-year-old German Shepherd, and I've had him since he was a puppy. Sometimes I'd bring him to the shop, where customers loved him. Most days he'd lie outside my office with a tennis ball in his mouth, happily greeting anyone who walked through the door. Honestly, Max has been the most dependable relationship in my life. No drama. No complaints about me working late. Just loyalty. Whether we're hiking in the mountains or he's lying beside me while I sketch motorcycle designs, he's always happy just to be there. Then there was my fiancée, Stacy. She's 27, and we'd been together for 2 years. We'd been engaged for the last 6 months, with our wedding scheduled for the fall. We'd already paid deposits for the venue, catering, and everything else. She moved into my apartment after our first year together. On the surface, everything looked perfect. She had her career. I had my business. We had our future planned out. I met Stacy through a mutual friend at a housewarming party, and at the time it honestly felt like fate. She was beautiful, blonde, always perfectly put together, the kind of woman who turned heads the moment she walked into a room. She was smart too. She knew how to hold a conversation, impressed clients effortlessly, and always seemed to know exactly what to say. Our first few dates felt amazing. She showed genuine interest in my business, asked thoughtful questions, laughed at my jokes, and made me feel like we'd known each other forever. Looking back now, I realized there were warning signs I chose to ignore. She often made fun of my friends, saying they were too basic because they enjoyed sports and video games. She once called my best friend Tristan's apartment a man cave nightmare, simply because he had a big TV and a few gaming consoles. Tristan never really liked her. He used to tell me she gave off princess vibes. More than once he pointed out how differently she treated people depending on who they were. "Watch how she talks to that waiter," he'd say. "Now compare that to how she talks to your landlord. It's like she's two completely different people." At the time, I brushed it off. I convinced myself she was just being socially adaptable. That's something a lot of us guys do. We see what we want to see. When a woman who looks like she belongs on the cover of a magazine shows interest in us, it's easy to ignore the warning signs. Call it basic male programming. That's exactly what I did. I ignored every red flag because I genuinely believed we had something real. Our relationship felt solid. The chemistry between us was incredible. She looked amazing by my side at industry events, and I honestly believed I'd found someone who respected all the hard work I'd put into building my life. So when she started hinting about getting married, I didn't hesitate. I thought, why not? I was financially stable, my business was doing well, and I felt ready for the next chapter of my life. Then everything changed. It was an ordinary evening in May. I was in the kitchen making dinner. I usually handled the cooking, even after spending an entire day working at the shop, while Stacy was supposedly too exhausted from sitting behind a desk all day. As I was cooking, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Stacy. "Luke, things feel complicated. I'm stressed about the wedding, and I really need some space to think and figure everything out. Please don't contact me for a while. I'll reach out when I'm ready." That message hit me like a punch to the gut. We were only 6 months away from our wedding, and suddenly she needed space. No conversation, no warning, just a text asking me to disappear from her life while she sorted out her feelings. Still, I tried to be understanding. I replied, "Okay, I understand. Take all the time you need." Then, nothing. Complete silence. Exactly what she'd asked for. The next couple of days were miserable. I couldn't focus on anything. At work, I was trying to finish a custom leather seat for a 1972 Triumph when my best friend, Tristan, stopped by the shop. He stood there watching me sand the leather for almost 20 minutes before finally saying, "Dude, that seat was finished half an hour ago. You're just going through the motions." He was right. I set my tools down and closed the shop early for the first time in months. That Thursday night, Tristan came over with pizza. He didn't waste time sugarcoating things. "Dude, this isn't normal. Nobody asks for space 6 months before their wedding." He paused before adding, "Unless they're doing something shady." I defended her at first. Maybe she's just overwhelmed with wedding planning. Her mom's been putting a lot of pressure on her about the guest list. Even as the words came out of my mouth, I knew they sounded weak. Tristan didn't argue. He just gave me that look. The one that silently says, "You're smarter than this. We've been friends since high school." He was there when my mom passed away. He helped me move my shop twice without ever asking for anything in return. He's the kind of friend who shows up with tools when you mention a project instead of showing up with excuses when you actually need help. Then Friday night, everything changed. I got a text from Melissa, one of Stacy's coworkers. Melissa and I had always gotten along well. Her message simply read, "Luke, I think you need to see this." Then another one followed. "I feel terrible sending this to you, but you deserve to know." Attached was a screenshot from Stacy's Instagram close friend story. Melissa was one of the people who could see it. The photo showed bright sunshine, tropical drinks, crystal clear water. And Stacy, she was smiling from ear to ear, wrapped around her ex-boyfriend, Jordan. The caption read, "Living our best lives. Island getaway reunited. Sometimes you need to revisit the past to see your future clearly." My blood ran cold. So this was what needing space really meant. She'd asked me not to contact her while she flew off on a romantic vacation with her ex. To make things even worse, she'd been careless enough to post it on her close friend's story, forgetting that Melissa and I were friendly. I called Melissa immediately. She filled in the rest. Apparently, Stacy had told everyone at work she was taking time off because of a family emergency. Turns out that family emergency involved bikinis, piña coladas, and several more photos of her making out with Jordan on the beach. The pain didn't last very long. It slowly turned into something else. A cold, unmistakable sense of clarity. She never wanted space. She wanted me out of the picture while she tested whether things with her ex could work again. I was nothing more than the backup plan. She expected me to sit quietly in our apartment, keep paying the bills, and wait patiently while she figured out whether Jordan was a better option. All while wearing the engagement ring I bought her and while our wedding vendors were holding thousands of dollars in deposits I'd already paid. Fine. If that's how she wanted to play it, then it was my turn. Saturday morning, I switched into business mode. My first call was to the wedding venue. Cancelled. I lost the $5,000 deposit. Honestly, still cheaper than getting divorced. Next came the caterer. Another $2,000 gone. Then the photographer, the florist, the DJ. One by one, I canceled every single reservation until the wedding she'd spent months planning no longer existed. My next call was to a locksmith. I had every lock on my apartment replaced. The deadbolt, the front door lock, everything. Cost around $250. Worth every single dollar. After that, I spent the next hour organizing paperwork, documenting exactly what I'd paid for and what legally belonged to me. Seeing everything written down was eye-opening. I'd covered roughly 80% of everything we'd shared financially. Then there was the engagement ring. Before leaving on her vacation, Stacy had conveniently left it sitting on her nightstand. I figured she probably didn't want a tan line showing up in all those beach photos with Jordan. It was a 3-carat diamond that had cost me nearly $15,000. I locked it safely inside my home safe along with all the purchase documents proving it belonged to me. In Arizona, an engagement ring is considered a conditional gift. Since the wedding was no longer happening, I wasn't about to let that ring disappear too. The car needs a little explanation. About 6 months earlier, Stacy's old Honda finally gave up. The timing belt snapped, bent the valves, and repairing it would have cost more than the car was worth. She needed reliable transportation for client meetings, but there was one problem. Her credit was a disaster. She'd maxed out several credit cards on designer handbags and those ridiculously expensive $300 face creams, so getting approved for a loan wasn't happening. I decided to help. I bought a used but well-maintained Mazda 6 for around $18,000. The loan was in my name. The title was in my name. The insurance was in my name. Everything was legally mine. That wasn't an accident. I'd learned from my uncle's mistake. My dad's brother had let his ex-wife keep driving a car he was still paying for during their separation. She ended up totaling it. The insurance wasn't enough, and he was left paying off the loan while also dealing with a lawsuit from the other driver. I promised myself I'd never put myself in that position. So I didn't. That night, I called my dad. I needed to hear his opinion. Dad. Stacy asked for space, then flew to Hawaii with her ex. I'm changing the locks and selling the car. There was silence for a few seconds. Then he finally spoke. Son, your Uncle Dave lost his house over less than that. You're doing exactly what needs to be done. He paused before asking, You need help moving her furniture? That was my dad. Straight to the point. The original agreement with Stacy was simple. She'd make monthly payments to me, sometimes late, and she'd have full use of the car. But legally, it was 100% mine. I'd never added her name to the title, the loan, or the insurance. The next morning, I grabbed the spare key and drove the Mazda to a dealership that specialized in buying used cars. I walked inside and told the manager, I'm the registered owner. I'd like to sell it. After a quick inspection, they offered me around $16,500. I signed the paperwork and left the car there. Back at my apartment complex, The parking space she'd always used sat empty. Even the dealership manager raised an eyebrow when I mentioned I was selling my fiancée's car. I just shrugged. She wanted space, I said. I'm giving her about 16,500 feet of it. He laughed. Then I called Tristan to come pick me up. When he arrived, he just shook his head. Damn, he said. You're ice cold right now. Then he smirked. But honestly, she deserves it. The rest of the weekend, we packed up Stacy's belongings. We didn't throw anything away. We simply boxed everything carefully. Every designer shoe she owned. I counted 37 pairs. Every overpriced handbag. Every piece of jewelry I'd bought her for birthdays, anniversaries, and special occasions. Everything was packed neatly and ready to go. While packing, I stumbled across a few things I wasn't expecting. There were credit card statements showing thousands of dollars in debt she'd never told me about. I found roughly $800 in emergency cash taped behind her dresser. Then I discovered something that hurt even more. A journal. Inside, she'd made a handwritten list comparing me and Jordan. The entry was dated 3 months earlier. Under my name, she'd written things like, financially stable, would make a good father. Under Jordan's name, exciting, passionate, shared history. Judging by where she was spending her vacation, it wasn't hard to figure out which side she'd chosen. I also scheduled a meeting with my lawyer. I showed him all the screenshots Melissa had sent me, explained everything that had happened, and asked how I could protect myself moving forward. Thankfully, Arizona isn't a common law marriage state. That alone saved me a lot of potential headaches. We'd never combined our finances. My apartment belonged solely to me. The car legally belonged to me. My lawyer told me to document absolutely everything. The canceled engagement, the sale of the car, every item packed from the apartment. He also advised me to communicate with Stacy only through written messages from that point forward. Oddly enough, I felt calm. It was like performing a necessary surgery. Did I feel like an idiot for trusting her? Absolutely. But I refused to let my emotions make decisions. The facts were simple. She asked for space. She asked me not to contact her. Then she spent that time vacationing with her ex. As far as I was concerned, she had already ended the relationship. I was simply respecting her wishes while protecting myself. The shop was unusually quiet that weekend, but I went in anyway. I needed somewhere to keep my mind busy. I reorganized the tool room, deep-cleaned equipment, updated inventory records, finished all the little jobs that usually get ignored during busy weeks. There's something strangely therapeutic about organizing your workspace when your personal life feels completely out of control. My head mechanic, Diego, stopped by for a few hours to help with a rush order. He never asked why I was working on a Sunday. He simply handed me whatever tool I needed and got back to work. That's one thing I love about the guys at my shop. They understand that sometimes working with your hands is the best way to clear your head. Meanwhile, according to Instagram, Stacy's living our best life vacation lasted another week. The countdown to reality had officially begun. There was one small thing I was grateful for. At least my Ducati was safe. Stacy had always complained that it was too dangerous and a waste of money, but I'd refused to sell it. After Tristan picked me up from the dealership, he looked over and asked, "Bike ride this weekend? You could use one." He was absolutely right. Ironically, Stacy had actually tried to convince me to sell the Ducati only 6 months into our relationship. We could use the money as a down payment on a bigger place, she'd suggested. The funny part was that I already owned my apartment outright and had absolutely no interest in taking on a bigger mortgage for a house we didn't need. So the Ducati stayed. Looking back, I was incredibly glad I'd stood my ground. That small decision turned out to be another reminder that trusting my own judgment wasn't such a bad idea after all. Sunday morning, Tristan and I fired up our bikes and headed into the mountains. Tristan was riding his Kawasaki, and I was on my Ducati. The mountain roads were exactly what I needed. Flying through those tight curves demanded complete focus. When you're calculating lean angles, watching for loose gravel, and reading every corner, there's simply no room left in your head for relationship drama. The only thing I felt a little guilty about was Max. Technically, Stacy had agreed that we'd get a dog, but the truth was she'd never really cared for him. She constantly complained about his shedding, his energy, and how much his food cost. Part of me thought he'd be confused when she never came home. Turns out I didn't need to worry. If anything, Max seemed happier with just me around. He stretched out across the entire couch without anyone pushing him away and looked perfectly content. Meanwhile, Stacy's tropical vacation with Jordan lasted a full 10 days. Then Tuesday night finally arrived. Around 9 o'clock, I was sitting in my apartment having a beer with Tristan. He'd insisted on being there, just in case things got ugly when Stacy came back. A few minutes later, we heard keys jingling outside the front door. Then came the sound of someone unsuccessfully trying to unlock it. A pause. More scraping. Then loud pounding. "Luke, open the door. My key isn't working." Tristan looked over at me and grinned. "Showtime." I walked over and opened the door halfway. There stood Stacy, fresh from her beach vacation, dragging a suitcase behind her and looking absolutely furious. "What the hell?" she snapped. "Why isn't my key working?" "Because I changed the locks." I kept my voice calm and steady. Her eyes went wide. "You? What?" "I changed the locks." "Why would you do that?" "You asked for space and no contact, Stacy." I looked her straight in the eye. "So I gave it to you. Permanently." I paused before adding, "I canceled the wedding too. Already called everyone." She stared at me in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" I just needed some time to think. Without saying another word, I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot Melissa had sent me. The kind of thinking that happens on a romantic beach vacation with Jordan? Her expression changed instantly. The anger disappeared and panic took its place. That. She stumbled over her words. "Melissa showed you that?" "It's not what it looks like." I couldn't help shaking my head. "It looks exactly like my fiancée vacationing with her ex while I'm home planning our wedding. Seems pretty self-explanatory to me." She rushed to explain. "It was a last-minute trip. Jordan was going through a hard time. He just needed someone to talk to." Behind me, Tristan let out a loud snort. I stared at her for a second before asking, "So, you flew all the way to Maui to be his therapist?" She ignored the question. Instead, her eyes drifted toward the parking lot. Then she frowned. "Where's my car, Luke?" The entitlement in her voice was unbelievable, as if I'd misplaced one of her belongings. "It's not your car," I said calmly. "It never was." "What do you mean?" "It's being sold." Her jaw dropped. "The title is in my name. The loan is in my name. The insurance is in my name." She actually stomped her foot. "You're selling my car? You can't do that. I've been making payments." I shrugged. "You've been making payments to use my car. That arrangement is over." "This is insane," she yelled, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Before I could respond, Tristan burst out laughing. "Yeah, go ahead," he said. "Tell them your ex-fiancé changed the locks on his own apartment and sold his own car after you cheated on him. I'm sure that'll go really well." Stacy looked over as if she'd only just realized Tristan was standing there. "This is none of your business." He folded his arms. "You made it my business the moment you decided to cheat on my best friend." She turned back to me, instantly switching her tone. "Luke, baby, you're overreacting. Jordan doesn't mean anything to me. It was just a stupid trip. I needed to clear my head. I realized I want to be with you." I almost laughed. "Save the performance. Your belongings are already packed. When you're ready to collect them, send me a text." Just then, the elevator doors opened. Out stepped Stacy's younger sister, Brooke. She was 25 and basically Stacy's clone. Same entitled attitude, same expensive tastes, same habit of treating service workers like they were invisible. The only real difference was that Brooke hadn't found someone willing to finance her lifestyle yet. She stormed over. "What's going on?" By then Stacy had gone into full crying mode. "He changed the locks," she sobbed. "He sold my car. He canceled our wedding." Brooke shot me a look like I'd committed some horrible crime. "After everything my sister has done for you?" You're just throwing her out? Tristan couldn't help himself. What exactly has she done for him besides take a romantic vacation with her ex? Before the argument could escalate, I raised a hand. Check her Instagram. We're done. At that moment, Max started barking from inside the apartment. Stacy's eyes widened. You're keeping Max too? I honestly couldn't believe she had the nerve to ask. The dog whose name you could barely remember half the time? That dog. Brooke practically started screaming. She asked for a little space to think. You didn't have to destroy her life. I looked at both of them. No. She made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I pointed toward the lobby. Your belongings will be downstairs tomorrow at noon. You'll have 1 hour to collect everything. If it's still there after that, it's going to Goodwill. Without waiting for another response, I closed the door and locked it. Through the door, I could still hear Stacy crying and Brooke yelling as their meltdown grew louder. Tristan simply shook his head. Dude. He picked up his beer. You dodged a bullet. Want another drink? Max walked over, rested his head on my knee, and looked up at me. I scratched behind his ears. It's just us now, buddy. Tristan raised his bottle. To the most expensive lesson you'll ever learn. I smiled and clinked my bottle against his. Worth every penny. Later that night, after Tristan headed home, I sat alone on my balcony overlooking the city lights. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. No more explaining why I had to stay late at the shop. No more defending the time I spent with my friends. I pulled out my phone and sent my dad a simple text. It's done. Locks changed. Car sold. Wedding canceled. About a minute later, he replied. Proud of you, son. Come over this weekend for steaks. Bring Max. And for what it's worth. Your mom would have kicked her ass. I couldn't help smiling. My mom had been gone for 6 years, but Dad was right. She would have seen through Stacy almost immediately. The next morning was like watching someone discover gravity after stepping off a cliff. At exactly 6 in the morning, the messages started. You can't do this to me. Where am I supposed to live? I need my car for work. We need to talk like adults. I made a mistake, but you're being cruel. I didn't respond to a single one. Right at noon, Tristan and I carried all of Stacy's packed belongings down to the lobby. I'd even taken the time to organize everything by category. More courtesy than she deserved, honestly, but I wasn't about to stoop to her level. A few minutes later, Stacy arrived with Brooke and their mother, Cheryl. If Stacy's entitlement had a source, it was standing right in front of me. The moment Cheryl walked in, she started laying into me. Luke, this is completely unacceptable. Stacy made one mistake. She was confused. She's been under enormous pressure because of the wedding. Not anymore, I replied calmly. I pointed toward the neatly stacked boxes. Everything she owns is right there. You have 1 hour. Cheryl looked stunned. My daughter lived with you for a year. Without being on the lease, I answered. Without paying rent. And while driving a car that legally belonged to me. I shrugged. Looks like the free ride is over. Her face turned bright red. Stacy couldn't decide whether to cry or glare at me. Brooke was busy typing on her phone, probably updating the entire family group chat with the latest drama. I wasn't interested in arguing. I simply told the doorman they had until 1 o'clock to collect everything. Then Tristan and I left for lunch. When we came back, they were gone. So were the boxes. Mission accomplished. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. The calls and messages only got worse. It wasn't just Stacy anymore. Brooke started calling. Then Cheryl. Then even Stacy's dad got involved. When I blocked their numbers, they simply started calling from their friends' phones. The version of the story they told everyone was unbelievable. According to them, I'd cruelly thrown Stacy out over one simple misunderstanding. I'd stolen her car. I'd kicked her out of our apartment. Funny how nobody ever mentioned the romantic beach vacation she'd taken with her ex while we were still engaged. On social media, Stacy went into full victim mode. She posted vague quotes about betrayal, trusting the wrong people, and healing after heartbreak. One post showed her staring sadly out a window with the caption, "Sometimes the people you take a bullet for are the ones standing behind the trigger." The irony was almost unbelievable. Before long, mutual friends started reaching out. "Dude, selling her car was pretty cold. Couldn't you have at least given her more time to find somewhere to live?" Thankfully, Melissa wasn't letting those stories spread unchecked. She told everyone the truth. "He has screenshots," she'd say. "She was on a romantic vacation with her ex while she was still engaged." Apparently, Stacy figured out Melissa had been the one who sent me the evidence. Not long after, Melissa called me. "They fired me," she said. "Stacy told our boss I created a hostile work environment by interfering in her personal life. That honestly made me angrier than anything Stacy had done to me. Melissa had simply done the right thing. She'd tried to protect me, and Stacy repaid her by getting her fired out of pure spite. I called Melissa immediately. I told her I'd help however I could. References, professional contacts, job leads, whatever she needed. It was the least I could do." She thanked me and quietly admitted, "I knew Stacy could be selfish, but I never thought she'd go this far. I promised I'd introduce her to several people in the industry who might be hiring." Melissa was talented. She deserved a better workplace. Stacy's bitterness shouldn't be allowed to ruin her career. That night, Tristan came over for our usual gaming session. We fired up Call of Duty while Max stretched out comfortably on the floor beside us. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with new messages from Stacy, each one sent from yet another borrowed number. During one match, Tristan grabbed my phone. With an overly dramatic voice, he started reading the messages out loud. "Luke, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. I was confused, but I chose you. Please answer me." He swiped to the next message and cleared his throat dramatically. "My mother is extremely disappointed in you. She says you're behaving like a child." I clutched my chest in fake shock. "Well, I guess I'll just cry myself to sleep on my Ducati." Tristan laughed and opened the next message. "I hope you know you're breaking my heart. I cried all night thinking about our wedding." He nearly spit out his drink. "Oh my God. She's seriously complaining about her ruined vacation after cheating on you." Just then, my phone buzzed again. Tristan looked down at the screen and burst into laughter. "Dude." He held up the phone. "You have to hear this." He read it aloud. "I miss Max. He misses me too. Dogs need a mother." I looked over at Max. He was lying on the floor, happily chewing his favorite toy without a care in the world. "Yeah," I said dryly. "He's absolutely heartbroken. Just look at him. Wasting away from grief." Tristan laughed but kept scrolling through the messages on my phone. "Oh, here's one from her dad." He cleared his throat and read it out loud. "Luke, I've always respected you as a businessman, but the way you've treated my daughter is completely unacceptable. We expect you to make this right." Tristan looked up at me. "What exactly does make this right even mean?" I shrugged. "I'm guessing it means giving her the car back, letting her move back into my apartment rent-free, and probably apologizing for having the audacity to be upset that she cheated on me." At that point, the whole situation had become so ridiculous that it was almost funny. Stacy and her family genuinely seemed to believe they lived in a world where consequences applied to everyone except them. In their version of reality, I was somehow the villain simply because I'd responded logically to being betrayed. Instead of dwelling on it, I buried myself in work. A customer had dropped off a vintage Honda CB750 for a complete restoration, and I threw myself into the project. There's something incredibly therapeutic about taking an engine apart piece by piece, cleaning every component, and rebuilding it into something even better than it was before. The shop became my escape. Unlike relationships, motorcycles made sense. Every problem had a logical solution. Every project had a clear beginning and an even clearer finish. Eventually, my employees noticed I wasn't quite myself. One afternoon, after I'd spent nearly 3 straight hours rebuilding a wiring harness without taking a break, Diego, my head mechanic, finally spoke up. "Boss, what's going on?" So I gave him the short version of everything. He listened quietly, nodded once, and simply said, "Women, man." My cousin went through the exact same thing. Then, without missing a beat, he asked, "You want me to order those brake calipers for the Triumph while you finish the wiring?" That was exactly what I needed. Practical help, not drama. The shop stayed open late almost every night that week while I buried myself in work. Honestly, there's no better cure for heartbreak than watching your business grow instead of watching your paycheck disappear on someone else's lifestyle. That Thursday, Dad stopped by with lunch. It had become our tradition ever since I'd opened the shop. He'd bring sandwiches from a little deli near his house, and we'd sit together in my office talking about whatever came to mind. Halfway through lunch, he looked at me. "So, how are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," I admitted. "Work helps." He nodded knowingly. "Your Uncle Dave gained 15 pounds after his divorce." He sat around eating microwave burritos and watching game shows. Dad looked me straight in the eye. "You're handling it the right way. Stay busy. Keep moving forward." Simple advice. Exactly what I needed to hear. About 2 weeks after Stacy came back from Hawaii, the real harassment began. The first visitors were the police. I came home from work one evening to find a patrol car parked outside my building. 2 officers wanted to speak with me about a reported domestic dispute and accusations that I was refusing to return someone's personal property. Thankfully, I'd already spoken with my lawyer. I calmly showed them everything. Proof that the car belonged to me. My apartment lease showing I was the sole tenant. Receipts proving I'd canceled the wedding. The screenshots of Stacy vacationing with Jordan. I also explained that every single one of her belongings had already been returned. After reviewing everything, the officers agreed it was clearly a relationship dispute rather than a criminal matter. As they were leaving, one of them paused beside me. Quietly, he said, "Document everything from this point forward. These situations usually escalate." It sounded like advice from someone who'd seen this exact situation many times before. The very next day, my landlord called. Someone had filed a noise complaint, claiming there had been loud arguments and possible domestic disturbances coming from my apartment. I explained everything. Fortunately, I had a good relationship with the property manager. She even admitted she'd seen Stacy trying several times to sneak into the building behind other residents instead of checking in properly. Then things got even worse. Stacy and Brooke started showing up at my workplace. Somehow, they always managed to appear right around closing time. One afternoon, Stacy actually tried to force her way into the elevator with me while yelling that I'd ruined her life. The moment Diego and the rest of the guys saw what was happening, they immediately stepped in. Diego positioned himself between us. "Boss," he asked, "want us to call security?" I nodded. Without hesitation, the crew escorted both sisters out of the building. No questions, no hesitation. My team had my back. By then, it was obvious this wasn't going to stop on its own. I filed a police report documenting the ongoing harassment. I started recording every interaction, saved every voicemail, kept screenshots of every text. I installed a security camera outside my apartment door that streamed directly to my phone. I also gave the front desk a photo of Stacy and instructed them not to let her into the building under any circumstances. Then came the final straw. One morning, I walked outside and found every tire on my car slashed. Fortunately, the security cameras caught everything. The footage showed Brooke arriving around 3 in the morning. The video was crystal clear. You could see her face perfectly as she crouched beside each tire, methodically stabbing them one after another with what looked like a hunting knife. The police were called, and charges were filed. According to the incident report, the damage totaled more than $800. All 4 tires had been high-performance ones that I'd upgraded the previous year. Thankfully, my insurance covered the repair after I paid the deductible, but dealing with the tow truck, the repair shop, and all the paperwork was a huge headache. After that, I became paranoid about my Ducati. I started parking it in a secure garage a block away from my apartment. There was no way I was letting them get anywhere near that bike. The Ducati wasn't just another motorcycle. It was the reward for years of hard work and sacrifice. If they damaged it too, I'm honestly not sure I could have stayed as calm as I had. That same day, something completely unexpected happened. I got an email from Jordan. Of all people. His message was short. Man, I'm sorry about all of this. She told me you two had already broken up before our trip. I had no idea you were still engaged. She's been showing up at my apartment too. I figured you should know. It turned out Stacy had lied to him just as much as she'd lied to me. She told him we'd ended things weeks earlier, that I was possessive, that I refused to accept the relationship was over. When he eventually learned the truth through mutual friends, he ended things with her immediately. After that, she started showing up at his apartment without warning, crying and begging him to take her back. Before we ended the call, he laughed and said, "Bullet dodged, brother." I couldn't argue with that. Not long after, I discovered Stacy had started spreading even uglier rumors. She was telling people I was abusive, that I controlled her finances, that I'd trapped her in the relationship. Classic Darvo. Deny. Tech. Reverse victim and offender. Instead of admitting she'd been caught cheating, she was trying to paint herself as the victim of some controlling monster. The problem with her story was simple. Too many people knew what had really happened. My neighbors had seen me taking Max for walks every evening while Stacy stayed inside watching Netflix. My employees had watched her show up asking me for money whenever she'd maxed out another credit card. Our mutual friends had seen the way she treated waiters, cashiers, and anyone she considered unimportant. The truth was hard to hide when so many people had witnessed it firsthand. Through all of it, Tristan and Melissa never wavered. Tristan even made sure word got back to Stacy that I was documenting everything for a restraining order. Melissa, despite losing her job because of Stacy, continued helping me. She sent even more screenshots. This time, they showed Stacy bragging to her friends about the beach trip before she'd even left. One message read, "Luke thinks I'm just taking time to think. LOL. Meanwhile, Jordan and I are going to be living it up in paradise." Every screenshot included timestamps, dates, and everything else needed to prove exactly what she'd planned. It was undeniable evidence that the entire thing had been premeditated. I forwarded every single screenshot to my lawyer, adding them to the growing stack of evidence. After Brooke slashed my tires, I called my dad again. "They're escalating," I told him. "They slashed my tires. They're showing up at my work. They're spreading rumors." To my surprise, he sounded completely calm. "Makes sense." I frowned. "How does any of this make sense?" He answered without hesitation. "Son, you took away her free ride. People don't give up resources without putting up a fight." He reminded me of my Uncle Dave again. His ex-wife did the exact same thing. She keyed his truck, told the neighbors he was cheating. It's what happens when the gravy train stops rolling. He paused before asking, "You set up those security cameras the way I showed you?" "Yes, sir. They caught Brooke on video with the knife." "Good man." A few days later, I officially filed for a restraining order. By then, I had an overwhelming amount of evidence. The repeated harassment at my workplace, the slashed tires, the endless calls and text messages from dozens of different numbers after I'd blocked the originals, the false police reports, the security footage, everything. Eventually, the hearing date arrived. Watching that courtroom felt like seeing the surprised Pikachu meme come to life. Stacy showed up with Cheryl. Both of them were dressed as though they were headed to church, clearly hoping to win the judge's sympathy. I showed up with my lawyer, and a binder overflowing with evidence. It didn't take long to figure out Stacy's strategy. She portrayed herself as a heartbroken young woman who'd made one mistake and was now being cruelly punished by an obsessive, controlling ex. Maybe that story would have worked if we hadn't brought receipts. My lawyer calmly walked the judge through every incident, every screenshot, every police report, every piece of video evidence, every threatening message. As the judge flipped through the binder, his expression became more serious with every page. When everything had been presented, his decision came quickly. The restraining order was granted immediately. 3 years. No contact. No coming within 500 feet of me, my apartment, or my workplace. I honestly thought that would finally be the end of it. I was wrong. About a month after the hearing, Cheryl called me. Apparently, the family was struggling financially. Without a car, Stacy couldn't keep a steady job. Brooke was drowning in legal bills from the vandalism charges. According to Cheryl, they desperately needed help. Then came the unbelievable request. Would I consider selling Stacy the car back? Or maybe loaning them some money until they got back on their feet? I laughed. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. The sheer audacity was unbelievable. These people had tried to destroy my reputation. They'd harassed me, damaged my property, filed false reports, spread lies about me, and now they wanted financial assistance. When I finally stopped laughing, I answered calmly, Cheryl, both Stacy and Brooke are violating the restraining order by using you to contact me. I'm forwarding this call to my lawyer and the police. Don't call me again. Later, I found out through mutual friends what happened after everything fell apart. Stacy lost her job. Apparently, missing work over and over because you no longer have reliable transportation isn't something employers are willing to tolerate. On top of that, she'd maxed out her credit cards paying for that beach vacation. She ended up moving back in with her parents, but from what I heard, her constant demands and drama eventually drove a wedge between them. As for Jordan, he was long gone. After Stacy showed up drunk at his apartment one too many times, he blocked her completely. Brooke wasn't doing much better. She was sentenced to community service for slashing my tires and had to pay restitution for the damage she caused. As for me, I sold the engagement ring. Then I booked myself a 2-week solo trip to Europe. I didn't post a single photo online. I wasn't interested in proving anything to anyone. The trip was for me. When I got home, I completely transformed my apartment. Fresh paint, new furniture, a new beginning. For the first time, it truly felt like my home again. Clean, peaceful. Just a place where a man and his dog could enjoy life without unnecessary drama. Tristan and I still get together every week. One unexpected silver lining was that he and Melissa really hit it off. They've been dating for about a month now. Most weekends, the four of us, if you count Max, end up hanging out at my place for game nights. It's honestly refreshing to watch two people who actually respect each other. Meanwhile, the shop kept getting busier. After the first week of feeling completely lost, I'd thrown all my energy into a major custom project. A beat-up Harley Sportster. I stripped it down to nothing but the frame. Rebuilt the engine with performance components. Designed a custom paint job with a subtle metallic flake that changed color depending on how the light hit it. When Tristan stopped by during the final assembly, he walked around the bike, whistled and said, "Man, you really outdid yourself on this one. That tank alone is worth whatever you're charging." The customer absolutely loved it. He referred 3 of his friends to the shop, all wanting similar custom builds. That's the beauty of the motorcycle community. A good reputation spreads faster than any advertisement you can buy. Diego and the rest of the crew deserved a lot of the credit too. During everything that happened with Stacy, there were plenty of days when I wasn't operating at 100%. Without complaining, they stepped up and carried the extra weight. So when that Sportster project ended up being featured in a motorcycle magazine, I made sure every member of the team got credit. And a bonus. A great crew is worth more than gold. About 3 months after the restraining order was granted, I was displaying one of my custom bikes at a motorcycle show in Las Vegas. That's where I met Sarah. She was 28, an industrial designer, and rode a Triumph Street Triple. Instead of making the usual comments about how nice the bike looked, she started asking detailed questions about the fabrication work. Real technical questions. The kind that immediately told me she actually knew what she was talking about. We exchanged numbers for professional reasons. At least that was the plan. Before long, we were texting about motorcycles, then about work, then about everything else. We've been casually dating for the past couple of months. What I appreciate most is that Sarah already has her own life, her own career, her own apartment, her own money. She doesn't need anyone to take care of her. And Max absolutely adores her. The first time she came over, he immediately grabbed his favorite toy and dropped it at her feet. He'd never done that with Stacy. Dogs have a pretty amazing ability to judge character. Last week, Sarah came with me to Sunday lunch at my dad's house. The two of them spent almost 2 hours talking about motorcycle engine design while I stood outside grilling steaks. Later that evening, Dad sent me a text. "She knows her stuff. Smart choice, son." Coming from a man who's naturally suspicious of almost everyone, that was about the highest compliment he could give. Looking back now, I learned more about myself during those few months than I had in the previous 10 years. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever realized. I learned who would truly stand beside me when life got difficult. And I learned that sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is completely remove toxic people from your life. These days, I'm too busy building motorcycles and building a better future to waste time thinking about what might have been. Some lessons come with an expensive price tag. But in the end, they're worth every penny.